Welcome, adventurers! I am Goose, and I am here with my guest star for the evening.
Jacob.
There we go. Yep, so we are both into game development. This is going to be the first in a series on the channel of podcasts that are starred right here on Discord. And actually, I need to go ahead and probably on the quest board. Yeah, right. And actually, we'll use your project channel.
Okay.
Go ahead and call out to everyone. We're streaming a podcast about game deving. If anyone wants to listen in or ask questions. So, really quickly, this is part of Little Blue Feather Fairy's entertainment services. Is these podcasts, one for world building and this one for game deving, are for talking about what we do and how we do it and how you guys can get into what we do. This is purely creative work, but it requires a lot of background work that doesn't get noticed as much, that we'll definitely go over. But this is purely about anyone can do what we're doing now. It all just is a matter of how much effort you put behind it and what kind of work you do.
Yeah.
So, to start off with that, this being the opening or the inaugural podcast? The first podcast, we want to talk about where game development specifically starts. Not world building for game dev, but specifically where a game in its entirety begins.
Yes.
So, and the big thing with that is I am not currently developing anything right now. I'm working on some visual stuff for the game I'm going to do after the first book. But my guest star, Jacob, is a good friend of mine. He's been helping me with programming since I've started game development. And he is currently with a team who is releasing a game called Battlejacked on Steam. It is out and it is pretty damn good.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, I was messaging Toast. So, Jacob is a full-on game dev. He programs for a living. He's good at what he does. He knows systems inside and out. And he has worked on several different projects, this one being the one he's released. So, to start this off, before we go into how games in general start, I want to talk about how you first started with this idea for Battlejacked.
Yeah. So I had always liked playing Star Wars Battlefront, Lord of the Rings Conquest, just those like team battle games with like a larger epic scale. I always loved playing those. I just love like action battle games with like a little bit of strategy in there. I initially wanted to make this game because I had just gotten into Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. That was a fun game, and that was like I never have seen a battle simulator before that. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. Being able to create my own battles, because that's always like, what you would want to do after you play for so long. You're like, oh, I want to set up some unique scenarios, and you could do that with like mods and different things in other games. This is like the first game that kind of made it more like sandboxy. You could set up your own battles and everything. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But at the same time, like tabs, like it's like the combat is just way too totally accurate. It's too accurate. It's just the units fall down on their face for no reason. They get their weapons stuck behind them, and it's just like a little frustrating. You want to have like a real battle. So I play a lot of like indie battle games. I like Ravenfield, like those types of games. So I like the aspect of being able to like set up my own stuff, but also have the combat be at like a good level. And so that's what inspired me to make this game. I wanted to make a game with good combat that you can go and have fun, and it still be there's like some element of like wackiness and like whimsy, but at the same time it's like tactical and you can still have like strategy built into it.
Definitely, I can definitely see that, and that is.
So
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say so, and that is one of the core ways a lot of games get started is people playing games, seeing games, and going, "Hey, I want to do that, but my way."
Yeah. It's I'm always very critical of other games. I'm always critiquing and like, oh, this could be done better. I wish this was this way. And the only way you can make a game exactly how you want it and make it the best it can be is if you actually make it. So that's pretty much why I got into game dev. I've always loved, uh, playing games like Spore, uh, games where I can make my own stuff. Little Big Planet. I remember playing Time Splitters, just everything with like map makers. So you can make your own like modes and games and everything. I always loved doing that.
Definitely, yes, and I feel that a lot because a big part of game deving for me, especially, is the creative part of being able to, in like any world building stuff, but especially in game development, when you're making a game for yourself, you have control over all of it. You have control over every aspect. It's a matter of your skill to determine what you can make, but as long as you keep working on it, you can make anything, and that's the beauty of programming in general too.
Yeah. So like that's part of the reason I wanted to make a game where it's very sandboxy, but at the same time it has enough structure for you to pretty much guarantee to have a good time. Because if it's just too sandboxy, there's too much setup. Things can go wrong, and you're not always gonna have a good time. But I think with Battlejacked, we're in a pretty good area where it's structured enough, but still you can change things around and do what you wish with it.
Yeah, a big part of a lot of those games with the map building and especially the pick your own unit combat is freedom of choice, being able to assemble it how you like. I think that plays really well into what you've made.
Yes, thank you. And also you just like watching Game of Thrones, watching Lord of the Rings, like those games. I mean, those movies and TV shows. You just like watching, like, man, that is so epic. I want an experience like that. And I know, at least at the moment, there's not any like awesome cities and things in the game, but that's to come. But for now, you can at least have lots of units. Like the max I can do on my computer is around 200 before it starts lagging pretty bad. So you can have some pretty epic battles, and it's just really fun to like charge in the front line. You just have like 100 people run up behind you, and it's like a wall of people in front of you, and it's just you get to like feel and like live those epic moments that you see in movies, which is a really strong reason why I made the game. That was I wanted it to have like a really big sense of scale because not many games have that, or at least they don't have it where you can be at like a like a character's perspective. It's like always RTS or something larger. You don't get that sense of scale.
Yeah, I definitely feel that because I am a massive fan of Lord of the Rings and seeing the massive battles between all these different fantasy factions and the giant creatures they bring in and everything. It definitely brings a different scale to it when you have that many people or that many units just standing in front of you ready to take you on.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. Like I like RTS games too, and it's fun you to play like Total War or I really love the Battle for Middle Earth games, but at the same time, like it's just like guys standing and just playing like cheap animations, and it's like you don't get that same sense of feeling as like being in the thick of it and like the excitement of actually fighting people.
Yeah, I get you. Well, so and that is a good point about it is leading into some more stuff is the vision behind a game. The first idea often starts from like I want to change this, I want to do that. But once you get that thought, you sort of just start going and you start adding all this stuff. A big problem with me in game dev is adding too much stuff and layering it on too thickly. But there's so many things that just fit so well and you want to do that it's really hard to hold yourself back from making something massive.
Oh my god, yes, that is probably the number one issue I think I currently have with the game. with all the projects, that's just how it goes that I've had. They're you start out small and they get too big, and it's like, God, I can never finish this. It's just I need a whole studio behind me to do this. For Battlejack, from all those past experiences, I really tried hard to keep the scale small. Um, I guess I did a half decent job with that because it's a game that's, you know, probably typically like a small group of people would make, like, but I just did it by myself. So I tried to keep the scope small, but still got way too big for what it should have been for just me and my partner. So it's really difficult.
I definitely feel that, and that's like I said, I struggled with that a lot in the beginning. I've done a little bit better with that in Skin and Bones, thanks to you, of course, helping me along and letting me know the stuff that is challenging. Especially with recently, we talked about the hex based turn based hex panel system for the stealth fighting and all. Just going through and figuring
Yeah.
out there's so many different ways to program the same mechanics in a game. It's often a matter of how
hmm
detailed or how crazy do we want to go with it, and how much do we want to hold back to make it easier on us.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just some things that they're just because typically with us indie devs, you work with engines just because out of necessity is just take too long, and just we can't just make a whole engine by ourselves. So we use engines there, and they have a lot of built-in functionality, and sticking to a lot of that helps us accelerate our development and get things done a lot faster. But like there's some things that you just there are a gap where the engine is, and what you need to accomplish. And once you reach a point like that, doing something like that, it takes a long time, and you can get into some pretty serious like math and algorithms to try and accomplish those things, like doing different kinds of path finding. Like basically, for the grid, like trying to figure your own path finding system, you have to really learn up uh, on how to do that kind of stuff. And that could be difficult. You could have to read like a lot of different papers on it to try and figure out what kind of algorithms to implement.
Oh yeah, and just in that first day of looking at the different grid systems that had already been made in Unreal and just in general programming for grid based like combat like that, there are so many resources that have so many different takes on the same concept. It really is hard to like pin one
Yeah.
down and say this is what's going to work for me. But just to get back just to get back to overall scale. So for people who are interested in game dev as like a career or as a hobby, the first place to start is with that core idea. You can look at a game and say, I want to change this, or you can go more broad and say, I have this cool idea for a game. Let's look at games that might be a little similar and see what might gel well. And then from there,
Yeah.
it's a matter of getting your tools together, finding out if you really need to make your own engine, which for beginners it's not suggested, but if you have enough of a team and enough power behind you, a custom engine can go a long way for a good game. But all the same, there are a lot of good game
Yeah.
engines out there, Unity and Unreal, that have massive diversity to what they can make, and that's a great advantage.
Yeah, engines I believe are pretty crucial for indie devs to be successful, just because it really like shortens the length of a development time. Uh,
Yeah,
it's just hard out there. There's so many people doing it. You have to really be efficient with your time to make a decent living.
oh yes, time efficiency. When you're staring at a plan for a game and you see all the different stuff that goes into it, like the models, the meshes, the textures, and then the coding for all of those, it definitely gets a little overwhelming. So figuring out what you really need and what you don't is crucial. And along with that, picking the right engine it can make or break a game. But at the same time, engines are a lot of the bigger engines are built to be very diverse. So there's a lot of possibilities with what you're given.
Yeah.
And to go along with that, of course, one of the biggest things in game development is the art. There are a lot of very artsy games that require a lot of time to get that style right. And that's a big choice to make as well, is how you want your game to look and feel when you're playing it.
Yeah. Which is it's a very important decision. I think a lot. a lot of what brings people to the game is the aesthetics of the game. Like most people, unfortunately, especially if you're on mobile, they're gonna look at like your icon for like literally half a second, and that's all the time you have to grab them. And then, or if you're on PC, or maybe they get interested, they click on the thumbnail. Like it's you literally have probably 20 seconds of attention to grab them. You have to, really be eye catching or be beautiful to try and grab someone's attention like that quickly. It's unfortunately the way it is.
Yeah, and there are definitely a lot of games out there even now that have amazing art styles but just aren't fun to play, but they're popular because of how they look, and even if the mechanics aren't great, how they feel makes people want to play them more. And there are games out there with
Yeah.
terrible graphics or really crappy 3D graphics because it's hard to get really good detailed 3D graphics without a big team, but they play really well. They're fun to
Yes.
play.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
and
it's unfortunate, it doesn't matter how fun the game is. It's how marketable the game is. To try and grab people's attention.
and
So
a
you
bit
gotta do both. It's gotta be fun and it's gotta look good.
that is a big thing that's played into me because like when I was first starting, when I did Hot Shot way back when I started that, I'd made a commitment that I was going to keep the graphics really basic. And the more I looked at what I was making that was basic, the more I felt like, wow, I don't think anybody's going to want to play this because I don't even want to look at it. So it's definitely a balancing act between keeping it simple but also keeping it detailed enough that it fits what you're going for, or finding your style early on. And that's another thing that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot in indie development, is, or especially in solo indie development, but in indie development, the fact that you have to learn not just how to work these systems, but how to make what you want with these systems in modeling or texturing and all
Hmm.
that. That takes a lot of time. That's not even game development stuff. That's just learning how to put your, almost like your heart, your style into something and make it work.
Yeah.
But along with that,
It,
that the one of the greatest resources we have as indie developers is communities, YouTube, uh, forums and channels, and the engine talk where people from Unreal or Unity are talking to people about how this stuff works in their engines. There are a lot of big communities
yep.
out there and a lot of small communities out there that allow for this kind of stuff to like seep through. So people like me, beginners, can come in and be like, "Hey, wow, this is how this works. I know what I can do now."
Yeah, that is crucial. There's so many ways to use the community to your advantage to help you learn. It's amazing how generous other game devs are with sharing what they've learned and taking the time to make videos or posts. It really helps get you into game dev.
That is a big part of why I want to make videos like this and videos like the 3D modeling and the programming videos for my games, is simply because not only do I want feedback on my process, I want to know from people who are more experienced than me, like what they think I'm doing wrong or what they see that I could improve on. But I also want to give people who see that beginner's progress, they can see that this is where I started and it takes a little work, but anybody can get there. If I can do it, anybody can, you know?
Yeah.
But so starting with an idea, getting your resources together, knowing what you need and what you want from your game. I think another good thing to talk about, a good thing to get out there, is to make some key decisions in the beginning of your game, deciding what it's going to be long term, because that can shape every other step of the process, whether you're making 2D or 3D, first person, third person, all of that stuff. So just from you, what do you think are some of the most key decisions in planning a game that you need to make early on rather than wait to make?
Pretty much everything. Like you need to have a very clear vision of what the game is. You need to imagine yourself playing it. Is like it take a couple days or a week or even more, however long it takes. Just envision what the final product is going to be, because it will dictate how everything is done. You want you don't want to have things thrown in haphazardly together. You want it to be a cohesive package, from visuals to gameplay. And if you like, I made this mistake with the very previous project I was working on. I started with a grid based system, and then I transitioned into like finally like a Final Fantasy system of like combat. So like there's just so much like work you can put into something just to scrap it later if you don't try to, if you don't have a clear vision, if you don't anticipate all the different struggles and what it's going to take. It really is worth your time to at the very beginning, before even starting coding, just figuring out exactly what you want to do design wise, and then also try to figure out how much work it's going to be to program, and try to make things simple and easy for you. Because if later on discover like, oh my god, I didn't realize this was going to be this much work. I can never get this done by myself. I have to change the game. Then you just lost so many months of progress. And game dev is hard. Like it's hard to finish a game. It is really hard. I would probably say that of all the people that start making games, probably 90% never get finished. It is crazy difficult to release a game. So to develop a clear vision from the beginning is going to help you focus your time and attention into building things that are actually going to become the final end product. I think that's really important. And also having a clear vision of what the game is and how fun it'll be will also give you motivation to keep doing it.
Definitely, yes. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And just coming from being kind of a protege of Jacob, this is not the first time I've heard these kind of words, and that's part of why, while I'm writing this book, I am planning the game out and not doing too much heavy coding for it, because I have a rough or a pretty clear vision of what the game needs to be now, but I'm still planning out how I'm going to make certain aspects or what I need to code to make those things happen. And a big part of that is it just takes time. The planning phase of a game can be just as long, if not longer, than the like coding and making of the game.
Sorry, I'm stealing my the color pencils.
Say hi to Turnip.
Hello. Sorry.
Hey.
I started coloring the budgies again.
Oh, cute.
But on sketch paper.
Okay.
Or on paper. My dumb self just tried to zoom in on the paper.
And there's your Turnip intermission. She's got art stuff going on in the background. Trying
to zoom in on paper. I'm dumb.
You ain't dumb.
No, I do that too. I'm a digital. I do digital art as well, and
I will say
whenever I draw on paper, I do that.
I will say I don't do a lot of paper stuff because I'm terrible at 2D art. But the other day I saw a really cool 3D model, and I was looking at the picture trying to go around it like in Blender, trying to see all the sides of it, and it wasn't working. And I was like, well, why? What's the backside look like? But what were we going on about? The programming and planning phase. Like you said, a big part of that is knowing what you're gonna have to code. So imagining the game in your head, seeing what kind of mechanics or controls you're gonna need, is a very big part of it.
Yeah, that's something people don't think about. They just think about, okay, I know the game I want to make. 'Cause it's hard enough to try to design a fun game and to think about all the different features you want to include. But then you don't think about what is it going to take actually to develop that. And that's something you really need to think about because, as indie devs, we don't have a lot of resources or development time at our disposal. We can't just have a full team working on it for a few years. It's usually just just a few of us or a solo person doing all the work. So you have to really think about how long it's going to take to do, because it's hard to continue working on a single project for a very long time, like a year, 2 years, 3, 4 years. That's really hard. That people typically will lose motivation before then. It takes a lot of dedication.
It definitely is hard to walk away from something and then come back to it and be like, okay, I know exactly where I was. I know what I'm doing. If you take even a 1 week break, you can come back and be like, I have no clue how I did what I did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you need to figure out exactly if it's even feasible. Because if you think, okay, I want to make this, MMO. It's like the typical joke that game devs had. Like when people first start to get in, they're gonna make an MMO RPG, and then myself or just with another person. It's like that takes like a lot of work. Like 10, 20 people would take them years to make. Like games like WoW or Star Wars: The Old Republic. These people play online and they think, okay, let me make this. No, they have like hundreds of developers working on those games. It's just unfortunately not possible. You need to try and scope your game and figure out like I can't do that by myself. Like do the research into what it's going to take to code that, and then you know try and skill the game appropriately.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention something else about that you just that you were getting at was a lot of the bigger games, a lot of more massive games, even games that are smaller. When you look at all the different things that have gone into the coding of them, there is a massive amount of work in even some of the smaller games, and a massive amount of polish, stuff that you don't really notice. Tiny details that make the biggest difference, that if you're not thinking about when you're going into it, you're not going to have them in the end, and that can detrimentally hurt a game.
Oh, very. Like polish is I think really important. People when something's not quite right, it sticks out. And people can definitely see that. And they say that polish is like 95% of the work, getting things perfect. It depends a lot on the game. I think for like more story driven games, that's definitely the case. Sandboxy games, not as much, but uh, it it takes a long time to polish a game, so you need to take that into account too.
I think that is a big difference. There are a lot of indie games, a lot of smaller games that are just like sandbox, little throw together stuff that it is fairly easy to see how they made them. And they're decently fun, but at the same time when you're looking at it you go, yeah, I want to play this, but I probably couldn't squeeze thousands and thousands of hours out of this if I tried to. That's something that you really have to look for when you're planning is how much time could someone really kill playing my game?
Yeah, it really depends on the game. Like Among Us is blowing up right now. I would say that's a little bit more of a sandboxy game. You could change all the settings on the server. Obviously, you want to polish the art style, but there's no. Uh, it, it's you play it and that's it. It's not like there's like a set difficulty because you're playing against other people. Like a game like Super Meat Boy, like they worked on like polishing that game for forever. The majority of the time was spent polishing the game because they have to make sure, like what are the exact reaction times of like to jump, like how fast you move, like how much control do you have, and then balancing out the levels perfectly. Games like that, like requires just a massive amount of polish to be able to get it to play and feel right. And if you don't, then you'll be able to tell like this character is not jumping right. Like this level's way too hard. This one's way too easy, and it ruins the experience.
Yes. And I definitely think a good way to like word that or get that across is for something like Among Us, it leans a lot on the social aspect on how first off, it works from one core mechanic, it just works. But it leans a lot on the social aspect.
Yeah.
A lot of multiplayer games do lean on that community to carry it. Whereas a game like Super Meat Boy, it's all about you playing the game and getting through challenges, you overcoming and accomplishing stuff. So I think another thing in the planning of a game is definitely finding out what you want your game to lean on or how you want your game to drive people to keep playing.
Yeah.
And back to that Among Us thing about like multiplayer. Multiplayer is a big hook even for really crappy games. Multiplayer can be one of the biggest hooks it has just because people enjoy the aspect of playing with their friends or winning and beating their friends at a certain thing. It's a draw to a lot of games.
Oh, most definitely. Like you can play a game that you absolutely despise, but you'll play it just because you want to hang out with your friends.
Just as the perfect example, I am not the biggest fan of first-person shooters. I prefer more story-driven solo experiences, but I spent months playing Call of Duty, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and 3 with a friend of mine, just because we had so much fun in the multiplayer messing with people, or in zombies just screwing around.
That's funny that you mentioned Call of Duty, because that's a game that I play often, and I hate that game. I do not like it. Just gameplay wise, I mean, I just don't like doing multiplayer, like competitive games like that.
It's such a basic game.
Yeah, it is. It's just like a Twitch shooter. And then there's just so many things wrong with it. It pay to win, and just it. But that beside, like, my friend likes to play it, and it's cross-platform. I have a PC. Everyone else has PS4s, so I play it just to hang out with them. And so having multiplayer I think, can really help a game out. But it can also kill a game too. If you don't reach a certain threshold where people can easily find matches and have fun, like, your game's gonna die for sure. So it's like a high risk reward, because it also takes a lot more development time. Like, if you're doing multiplayer, it's gonna at least double your development time to make that game, if not more. So it can really help you, like it did in Among Us, or it can kill you, like a lot of other indie games where people can never find a match and no one ever buys it because it gets bad reviews because of that. So it's difficult, but if you can make a good multiplayer game, it can really hook people, and a lot of people play just because they love playing with their friends, and adding multiplayer to the game can really, accentuate its best qualities.
Yes, definitely. That is one of the biggest choices when making a game. Is multiplayer can be one of the biggest draws, but it can also be one of the biggest setbacks in a game, and it's really hard to make that call.
Yeah, because not only is it taking more development time, it's risky if you can't have good matchmaking. It really constrains development. There's a lot of things that you can't do because of multiplayer. Like, and balance has to be on point, because if things are unbalanced, people are going to get angry. Like when they die to something that's OP. You really have to do a good job with balancing and designing the game well, and working within those constraints. Cause there's a lot of things that go into a multiplayer game. Like the biggest thing is, like, it's not actually, like, what people are playing isn't actually what's happening.
Oh, I think you cut out for a second.
I was just gonna say that, like developing a multiplayer game is hard because things aren't happening in real time. Like, there's latency between the server and the clients, so you have to account and program for all those things. Like, what happens when someone gets a headshot on something on their screen, but actually on the server, maybe they have like a high ping or something, they actually had moved past that point now and they didn't get shot. Should they still get killed or not? You have to make some tough decisions. Like, you also can't do like stuff like time dilation. You really have to, like, plan things out. Well, it really constrains to what you can do. And that's why I personally like single player games better, because you can do things that you'll never be able to do in a multiplayer game, or to balance it, because you have to incorporate, multiple players, where as a single player you can cater to their experience. As a multiplayer, you have to try and make sure, like, everyone is having fun, is on usually equal footing.
Yes, that is definitely something I've seen a lot of games struggle on. And I think that's one of the reasons like you said, that's one of the reasons I get so away from multiplayer games, is because it is a constraint on freedom, honestly. A lot of games, what you program into a game is what the player has control over. If a player doesn't have control over anything, then it's not really a game, it's just a thing they're watching. But that is a constraint you have to place on players when making multiplayer rather than single player, just because if you give all those players all the freedom, it's going to lead to issues of, like, conflict between who has control over what.
Yeah, like Call of Duty is like a good example. Like, obviously, like, what do people want from Call of Duty? They want to run around and shoot and kill everyone. And if they didn't die once and they killed everyone on the map, and got like 100 kills, like they'd be having the time of their life. That's the best thing ever. But like you can't do that. Like one person can't be winning and having a great time because it'll be to the detriment of everybody else.
So
And like if you were playing a single player game, you could be like on a warpath, just like killing everyone. And you could be having a great time. But in a multiplayer experience, you have to make sure. At least I will say multiplayer competitive. Like co-op games are different, but multiplayer competitive exclusively, people have to be on equal footing, and there's a lot less action, and there's a lot more frustration.
okay, so and back to that, I just have two. I want to bring up two good examples of this. First off, the really simple one, CS:GO. The amount of like updating and changing they've had to do to keep it balanced because people play it so competitively is a key example of like that's another thing about the development of a multiplayer game is just the fact that if you put that time and effort into making the game, you also have to put that much time and effort into keeping up with the game. In a solo game, you can easily just develop it, see what bugs there are, patch them out, and then let it sit. In a multiplayer game, there's almost always going to be something that somebody is complaining about as you go forward.
Yeah, I would really advise, indie devs to stay away from at least like hardcore competitive multiplayer. There's other games with like more fun, just wacky competitiveness, which is really fun. But don't make it
what I say
more
right
complex than it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, what I say right now, and this isn't like a challenge or anything. I'm just going to say this outright. You are probably never going to make a esports super game on your first go.
Yeah, it takes a long time to build up to that. It's really crucial when you're first starting out, just to start with something simple, but not too simple, because if it's too simple, you're going to lose interest really quickly because it's not going to be that fun. Like, this is like Tetris. I don't really feel that passionate about it. I'm not going to finish it. Like, try to make it something that you're at least interested in, that you're going to finish it, that you can still learn from it, but it's not too overwhelming that you're going to be unable to do it.
And that is a concept that I want to get into just for a moment about the importance of certain programmable features over others. Because, like for Skin and Bones, the tile-based, some of the animals and the creatures and everything, I have a note list that has all the different possible like mechanics or controls that both the player and the opponents can have, and they're relatively listed in a top-down manner of importance. Because if I can only get so much in there, I want to get the most crucial or the most game-changing stuff in there that can make it more fun, rather than all the little niche ideas that could be cool but might not get in.
Yeah.
So this is all a matter of like this is all just the start of a game. This isn't even getting into, this has not gotten into actually coding mechanics or actually going into that. I definitely want to do specific podcasts for some of the more hardcore mechanics or some of the more hardcore ideas that games have shown and will show or have failed on. But this is all planning. This is just figuring out what kind of game you'd probably want to make.
Yeah.
So, going on with the planning topics and all, moving past like multiplayer versus single player, let's say for now for indie devs, let's go with a single player game. What do you think is a core concept or mechanic or idea that really shapes how, I want to say how a game plays? Like when somebody first starts up a game, what do you think one of the most crucial things a developer can do to make them want to play more in the first like hour or so is?
Yeah, definitely a good intro to the game is crucial. Like if your tutorial is overly complex or not fun, like people do not have a lot of time. Like no one's gonna. Unfortunately, like people don't really care about you or your game, and if they're not having a good experience, they're gonna go to something else. So, like the first like 20 minutes of your game, that's like just so crucial to like shaping and giving the first impression of what people see. So having a really good tutorial or like intro to the game is really crucial. And I think the best way to do that is introduce them as playing the game, but with restrictions on what's going on. Like a good example is, kind of like Mario, right? You learn to walk forward, you have to jump over a pipe, and then you learn there's a guy there, and you have to jump on top and kill him. Like it introduces things one at a time, right? You're not gonna throw them deep into the game where they have to do everything at once. They're gonna get confused and frustrated. Um, you try to let them experience as much as the full game experience as possible, but at the same time letting them learn, because that also gives them like a sense of like progression and flow, like learning new things, and like it's challenging their abilities, and they feel good that they're learning new things.
Definitely, yes. I think a good example of that is Monster Hunter. In Monster Hunter World was a big thing for a lot of people who played the games previously because it was one of the first games in the series that had a proper introduction to controls and mechanics. And I think it really dropped the ball on how it showed people how to play the game, because there were still tons of people who had absolutely no clue what they were doing. But at the same time, the introduction to mechanics, how you show a player how to do certain things, is really crucial.
Yeah. And just making sure they have a good time in that first 20 minutes, which it's a tall order, because to make someone have a good time when they don't know what's going on or how to do anything, that's a difficult task, because you want to make sure that everyone's going to have a good time. Like people who are experienced gamers are probably going to know the general control scheme if it follows, like, I mean, there's like certain set buttons and controls that are pretty much standard. So some people are gonna be able to get in and pretty much be able to know how to play. And if you're like hand holding them, they're gonna get annoyed. But at the same time, if someone's a newer player, like, or maybe they haven't played that type of game, they're gonna need to know like what's going on. And if you don't, give them enough information, they're gonna be confused the whole time. They're not gonna have a good time either.
Yeah, I definitely. And something else you mentioned there, just being clear with the control scheme, because there are a lot of very generic, very basic controls that almost every game has, and when you deviate from that, it is like it's lurching. It grabs you, and you're like, wait, what? So, along with planning out your game, planning out what mechanics it has, planning out how it controls is probably just as important.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you really have to try and like simplify it as much as possible. Don't make it overly complex, because it's just going to be a lot harder to teach people how to play.
And I think a big help for that is looking at games that are similar to what you hope to design, looking at their control scheme and seeing what you think works and what you think doesn't, and then testing out your own control setup to see if it's any better.
Yeah.
And you know what? That branch from learning how to control a game, that's also very important for focusing on what you're actually releasing to, because even as indie devs, we have access to some pretty good systems. If we really tried to, we could push our stuff to be on a console or on a phone, and you have to adapt to know, oh yeah, I have to make it work for that control scheme as well.
Yeah, that's something that Battlejack definitely, because we do plan to release on console and other things. It struggles with. It's Battlejack's a complex game. Like tutorial right now, I think just for the time constraints, it is not where I want it to be. So we're gonna improve that in the future. But it's hard to get that much information to the player, because there's a lot. Because Battlejack's kind of like almost multiple kinds of games mashed together into one, and that's why I love it. But it's also somewhat difficult to get people to understand how to play.
I definitely see that from playing it, from getting used to the buttons and controls it has. I can definitely see how it can be a bit of a struggle to map that to a controller, to change it over suddenly,
Yeah, because there's a lot going on. Well, first of all, you have the third-person shooter. That's pretty standard. That's easy to get people to understand what's going on. Like, you can make a tutorial with that easy. Then we have melee combat, which for most games, like all melee combat, there's really no set structure. Like as far like maybe movement, obviously, like that's pretty standard. But then attacking, a lot of times they have different keys for that, or it's a mouse click. A lot of times it's E. Like so, you have to really teach the player how to play on that because most melee systems they're all different. And then we also have like the RTS aspect of it. So there's like 3 different games of one that we're trying to get people to learn, like, and it's just a lot to do all at once. I really, I got a lot of ideas for the new tutorial. It's going to make it a lot better, introduce them in a more fun way than what they currently are.
Definitely, yes. And as I was gonna say something when you mentioned that melee combat was, me being the Dark Souls fanboy I am, if I have the option in a fighter game and I know the schematics match up fairly well, I usually map it to the standard bumpers for attack and all when I'm playing combat games. But there's a lot of deviation between, like, there are so many different kinds of games out there, and some of them have very similar playstyles and very clashing controls. You can go from one to the other and not know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, like sometimes it's like if we're talking about controllers, it's bumpers, and other times they use like the like circle or X or Y. Like it varies a lot. Like and it's like same with PC. Usually it's either the mouse button or like a key, but still you have to let the player know. Like they're not just gonna assume that, especially if you have like multiple kinds of attacks.
Well,
like that, then it gets really like the mappings get weird.
I was gonna get to that too about having like characters with abilities, or more specifically something I noticed in it was a space travel game I was playing recently, but it had in-depth like key-based bindings for all the different stuff on the ship, and stuff like that is really hard to introduce when you have a lot of stuff coming at the player really quickly.
Yeah, it really is.
It's something you definitely should
the best
consider.
way, and this is yeah, you definitely need to take your time with it. We for Battlejack, I probably spent maybe a month or so, maybe not a month, maybe 3 weeks working on an awesome like epic tutorial and everything that eventually, fortunately, got scrapped due to time constraints and everything. But we were working on a new one, and it really gave yourself a lot because the tutorial arguably is. Or the intro, I will say, intro to the game is the most important part of the game because that's what people are going to play, and that's what's going to, like, if people drop off before they get to experience like the core of the game and have fun with it, like that's what they're going to write the review about. That's what people are going to talk about. They get in and don't have fun right away. If they're not having a good time, they're not going to continue to play it to experience the good parts. They're going to drop it, and that's going to be their impression of the game. So really, give yourself a lot of time to do the tutorial and the intro, because it's really, really important. Like, spend a lot of time on it.
Yep. All right, and we are getting pretty far into this. I want to cover one more good topic that I think flows pretty well from this. A big thing that I think helps a lot with this, and especially that would help you, especially, I played Battlejack testing a little bit. I didn't test as much as I wish I had, but I tested a little bit of the controls and everything for him when he was getting it worked on. I think a big part of especially indie development is playing your own game, making sure it feels good to play for you.
Yeah, it's really crucial to test your game, and one thing that's a really good sign is if you're playing the game and you always have fun with it, because I've worked on a lot of games before, a lot of projects, and after playing it for so long, you're like, it's just so boring, and you come to hate the game. And I guess it also depends on the game type. Like a story-driven game, like replaying that and testing it is not going to be as fun as a more sandboxy game, just by the nature of it. But still, if you're having a good time playing your game, like a year into development, or 6 months, or however long it's taking, like that's a good sign. Like, so, making sure you're still having fun every time, and then the controls are good.
I feel like
that's a good way to tell if you're making a good game.
Yeah, I want to add on to that about, I feel like a good measure of if your game is going to be enjoyable for other people is if you get excited about being able to play your game, and if you get in and you're like, wow, this is exactly like playing your game and feeling it out is one of the most exciting things in
Yeah.
game development, and that's really a mark of have I made a game that'll sell? Have I made a game that I am happy with and that I enjoy? Because if you're not a fan of your work, then who else is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to like play the game, like play as much as I would like my own game, just because I'm so busy with everything and developing it. Like it's usually okay, I'm gonna jump in real quick. I'm gonna test this one exact specific thing, make sure this works. Let me test the balance of this and get in and out. But when we're about to do like an update or something, I do actually get in there and I play test for a while now, and yeah, it's just like it makes me like feel really good when you're playing and you have a good time. Like man, I this game is awesome. I love this game, and that's a really good feeling when you finally get time to play your own game. Like not not from like a testing perspective. I mean, it's your game. You're always going to keep like an eye out for bugs, but not specifically try and produce bugs, but just to play it for the intent of enjoyment. It and you have a really good time. That's awesome.
That is definitely something I wanted to get at more is like during the like building process, during the making process, you're always testing it. You're always seeing if the walls are there, if mechanics are working properly. But it is something entirely different to actually sit down and play it and go, yes, rather than bug fixes and all that. That it is massively different to work on a game, playing it, rather than actually play it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to do both. Obviously, it's important to try and find bugs and to play test it for those reasons to make sure things are working properly. But
Especially
it's
for an
also really
indie.
important to sit back, relax, and enjoy it. Just to try to just relax and play it as a player would, and
Definitely.
then you get the real experience of what people are having with it.
I think play testing is definitely important, especially for indies who don't have they don't have the ability to call on like 20 people who are fans of the franchise and be like, hey, can you play this and see how it goes? It's really important for us as devs to test and play our games to find out if it's really what we were going for.
Yeah.
But and something else you had mentioned, I think it was a little bit ago, about having a bunch of stuff you've had to scrap, or having a bunch of ideas or stuff you've like programmed and made and then had to get rid of. For every single game, including Skin and Bones now, Hot Shot, and Takara Craft, every project I've started, I've had at least 3 separate like Unreal Engine files for that I've been tweaking and messing around with, and then had to get rid of, replace, and come back to, and all that.
Yeah, it's just the way development is. Like it's hard. It is really hard to get a focused, clear vision of an idea and execute on it and develop a game all the way through with like as minimal, like relapse as possible. Like it just happens. Like you make things and it turns out like, okay, wow, this is actually going to be really hard to incorporate. I don't know if I could do this anymore. This idea is going to have to get scrapped. Like worked a month on it. Like that sucks, but that's just how it is. It's going to happen. So don't get too upset when it does, but you just got to keep an eye out for it and try as hard as you can not to do that.
And that is definitely something as an indie dev, if you're interested in this, to look out for is being careful about what you actually put into what you expect to be the final game, rather than making a test file or making a separate project to work out the kinks with it. Being careful of what you actually put in and what files you place, because it can really mess with stuff, and you will end up losing a portion or the whole thing if you're not careful.
Yeah, source control is like super important. Like backing up your save files and like being smart with your code, because we've all heard like horror stories of people not really backing anything up. Maybe it was like an update or something they did and accidentally deleted something, or did something and they can't go back and they lose months, if not year or more worth of work, and that's horrifying.
Yep, and that's something I've definitely practiced a little bit more with as I've gone forward. I haven't done too much crazy work with Skin and Bones, but all the files, all the assets, and everything I've made thus far, I have on a separate flash just in case something goes wrong and I have to start fresh.
Yeah, like for Battlejack, I have it in source control. I have it on my computer, on my partner's computer. I have it on my secondary drive on my computer. I have it on a flash drive, and I have it on a backup drive too. Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, if whatever happens, like, because like if you work on something for that long and it's gonna be something that's gonna make or break you. Like as indie devs, I feel like every game is like if you don't do too hot on this game, like it's like you need to succeed. Like there's little room for failure, so you really have to take good care of your code.
Definitely, yes. So I feel like that covers a lot of the first beginning stuff. It's a hell of a lot of content to get through, but it is all very much crucial in the grand scheme of things. As of here, I'll start winding it down. I want to say thank you anybody who makes it this far. Links will be in the description for this Discord where you can join myself and Jacob talking about game development, other people talking about the world and books and world building. There will be links to the Little Blue Feather Fairy Facebook and Instagram, as well as the Patreon, where you can start reading the book and later be able to play early builds of anything I actually get done when I get it done. And I will, of course, link Jacob's game on Steam in the description as well, so you guys can go check it out, because it's Battlejacked. Might as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It took a lot of work, and I definitely think...
It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, I definitely think what you've done and what you've done for me and as a developer it's a testament to how skilled you are as a programmer, and I think you deserve some praise for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. We'll have another talk soon about more technical things.
Definitely.
That's also really important. A lot of things I've learned is software architecture. It goes a long way in game development, and it could really help you out if you do things the correct way, or not, there's no correct way, but do things intelligently.
Definitely. I think that is a very good topic to focus in on next time, and I hope you guys will join us for that. So, until then, farewell, adventurers!